Good evening, everyone. I'm Makush Lopinder. The unemployment rate climbs, but so does the employed. Preliminary results from the November 2018 labor force survey show a 0.7% increase in the number of jobless workers compared to how things panned out months earlier in May last year. Here's senior statistician Cipriana Winters.
Employment rose by 2,300 in November when compared to May 2018 and reached about 211,000 persons. On a year-over-year basis, employment grew by 6,800 or by 3.4%. Meanwhile, the national unemployment rate rose to 10.7%, up from 10% in May, as the number of people looking for work increased. 2 of the 3 most populated islands that were surveyed experienced decreases in their unemployment rates, and 1 experienced an increase.
Now, according to Mrs. Winters, at the time of the survey, Grand Bahama and Abaco saw an uptick in employment. Sadly, the same could not be said about New Providence.
The rate in Grand Bahama was 11.9% and in Abaco 7.7%. On the other hand, New Providence's unemployment rate increased from 10.1% in May to 11%. Among the employed labor force, there were more men than women. However, in all the islands surveyed except Grand Bahama, men were fewer in numbers among the unemployed labor force.
Also on the decline in the 6 months leading to November was the number of discouraged workers.
Discouraged workers, according to the standard definition of the International Labour Organization, are persons without work and available for work, yet were not actively seeking work because they were not hopeful about their prospects of finding work. The number of discouraged workers in the country declined by 6.7%. Notably, the number of discouraged workers fell by 9.1% in New Providence and 9.8% in Grand Bahama. However, the number of discouraged workers in Abaco increased by 7.9%, partly offsetting the overall decline.
Now, statisticians say the employment gains were driven by private sector employment, which increased by 3.8% to 135,000+ people compared to May. Additionally, the number of self-employed people stood at 32,475, a 11.9% jump over the numbers shared last May. Well, former Cabinet Minister Fred Mitchell has since issued a brief release on the latest labor stats, in it noting that the numbers are indicative of the fact that unemployment is worse. Things, he said, are moving in the wrong direction, and this despite the signs and warnings the government continues to double down in what he called its depressing menu of stop, review, cancel, and cutback. The PLP senator is then urging the Minnis administration to reverse course before it inflicts more suffering on Bahamians. A clampdown on a troubling trend, as JCN's BJ McDermott tells us. The government's taken steps to ensure the roadworthiness of all used vehicles imported into the Bahamas from Japan.
Here's some figures for you. According to the Arawak Port Development, in 2016, more than 11,000 passengers and commercial Japanese used cars were imported. A year later, this jumped to 18,459. While the numbers fell in 2018 to 17,191, Labor Minister Dion Folks anticipates this will again increase this year. That makes the Bahamas what's best being described as a dumping ground for unsafe vehicles from Japan for quite some time.
Japan as a country has suffered several nuclear accidents, the latest in 2011 in Fukushima, and it is imperative that potentially radiated used vehicles are not allowed to enter the Bahamas.
So here's the plan. The government on Monday signed a contract with a Japanese-based company that's responsible for inspecting all vehicles for radiation along with other deficiencies. That includes things like steering wheel alignment, braking force, exhaust, gas and pipe emissions, cooling and fuel systems, the engine, mileage meter, frame and vehicle body, and warning light.
The contract will commence with an initial pilot program of 1 year. After the signing today, there will be a 90-day period to finalize the implementation process and, very importantly, to embark upon a public education program. The cost of the inspection is $150, which will be paid by the exporters in Japan. In early 2018, BPSQ decided to invite motor vehicle inspection specialists.
Now, the minister could not confirm nor deny whether radioactive cars has entered the Bahamas, but the director of the Bureau of Standards, Brene Ferguson Bufford, says she is hopeful that this collaboration would eliminate that risk.
We don't have the testing facilities in place for that, and we trust and pray that there isn't. But we want to now, because we've been a dumping ground for so long, and we've not had standards in place to ensure conformance to such standards, we really cannot answer that question. And so we trust that, moving forward in the next 3 months or so, we will begin to ensure that we test for all of these specifications, etc., that we will not have cars that are radiated entering the country here moving forward.
EAA is also contracted and approved by the regulatory standards body and agencies in Singapore, Mauritius, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zanzibar to conduct such used vehicle inspections. Reporting for JCN News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Netflix's documentary on the infamous Fire Festival fiascos have a lot of tongues wagging after show producers accused 2 former public officials and a university president of corruption. Well, University of the Bahamas president Dr. Rodney Smith is seeking to clear his name from that discussion. The documentary speaks of festival organizers dealing with the pressures of putting on the luxury event with rapidly depleting cash flow. Now, event producer Andy King indicated he had the head of the Bahamian Tourism Board, the Minister of Finance, and the head of UB waiting for $1 million. While Dr. Smith categorically refutes these claims. Further, he says that the university never entered into any contractual relations with event organizers. And in the face of such allegations, the president's now being advised on the appropriate legal action in this matter. Meantime, former tourism minister in an interview with The Guardian said the organizers did not need the Ministry of Tourism's approval, as that had already been received by local government officials. The music festival was expected to rival that of California's Coachella. Festival attendees were said to have pumped hundreds of thousands of dollars in hopes of receiving an exclusive luxury experience, only to meet on a remote island with little to no running water, electricity, or food. Fire Festival co-founder Billy McFarland was found guilty in a Manhattan court last year of defrauding investors of the festival and sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.
This segment of the news was brought to you by Alive.